we looked at this. I'm a product guy, so I looked at this and said, what kind of products can I make to help save the bees? And I got in touch with a guy in Seattle who, I know there's some bee people in here. It's called Crown Bees. You may know about them. They sell bee houses. The fact about bees is that, this is a learning journey, the wild bees do all the work, the honeybees get all the press. I mean, that's really where it comes down to. The honeybees are, I know that if they're bee people, I'm sure you guys are into honeybees, but the honeybees do get all the attention. They get movies made about them. They're the star at the farmer's market because of their honey and the bee pollen, which is great. But when I partnered with my partner Wyatt, he studied bees for 10 years, got his PhD just last year in wild bees, and he showed me how important these wild bees are. So when I told him my idea was to make a better bee house, and these bee houses are they look like a birdhouse you may have seen with little tubes in them. The wild bees go in and lay their cocoons, and then this guy was buying back these tubes or the cocoons and redistributing them. And I thought, okay, that's scalable. That's an interesting idea to spread bees. But he told me that the crisis is not houses. These bees find places to live. The crisis is there's no habitats for the bees. We're losing their habitats. So this is the genesis of where I am right now, my home park, which I'll get more into. But the whole challenge was how do we empower people to make moves in their own home and restore the bee population by restoring the habitats. Just a little background on me. I always say an entrepreneur is somebody who is generally unhireable by anyone else, and I think that's my story, right? I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts where we moved when I was 11 years old. My parents bought the small drugstore in the middle of it. My dad was a pharmacist. We were living right outside New York City, and he kept saying to me, I gotta get out of the rat race. He'd come home every day. I gotta get out of the rat race. So due to a tremendous coincidence where he was dropping us off at the airport to do spring break in Disney, and my dad was gonna stay behind and look for a job. We got a flat tire on the way to JFK. Barely made the flight. We all had to split up, and my mom sat next to a guy whose uncle was selling a drugstore in Massachusetts, and that's how the crazy, coincidences. But my dad could never have worked for anybody. He just had that attitude. He didn't like rules. He didn't like structure. And luckily, I had my mom who kind of kept him on track. But I realized early on, I started my career with Dow Chemical and like management training, and I just couldn't work for other people. I don't have that personality. So the question was, how do I do something where I can have the benefit of others and yet the independence of making my own decisions and not working for someone else. So the first thing I did was a power tool company called IGO Home Products. I don't know if anyone knows about that, but our most famous product was a Capuche knife block. It's a knife block that's all plastic straw, and you just stick the knife in. Has anyone seen that? That was one of our innovations. But we were a power tool company that ran on alkaline batteries. So back when I started this, I was introduced to John Nottingham and John Spurk. Probably don't know them, but they have a industrial design firm in Cleveland, and they had just invented the spin brush toothbrush, which they eventually sold to P&G for $460 million. But right after that launch, they said, can we do the same with power tools? And I had been with DeWalt Power Tool Company before I moved to Cleveland. We formed the company and we tried to set up what we call kitchen drawer power tools. It was power tools you could store in the kitchen drawer because they ran on alkaline batteries. They couldn't do a lot, but they could do the basics. Like a screwdriver could take a screw out of a toy or drive a small screw in. And it taught me that like good enough is good enough. In that case, like if you can solve 80% of the problem, you got something there. You don't have to be perfect, and sometimes getting to that perfect, which is what like Black & Decker was doing, may hold you back because you're putting too much cost in it. And the spin brush toothbrush was a toothbrush that sold for $7 when rechargeable toothbrushes were $100. So that delta, there's a lot of room there, and people were buying multiples. So after my power tool company failed, and it failed because of a lot of things, but we signed a deal with True Value, and it was a rebate where they said you'll get 30% rebate, and we got 70% rebate, and we were responsible for it. So anyhow, I started Mr. Beams, and Mr. Beams was a culmination of everything I had learned, that good enough is good enough with lighting. So for instance, in a closet like this, or is that a closet? Yeah, most people don't have lights, and that was the genesis of the closets. What if we could create a battery-powered light that only went on when you opened the door and then went off 30 seconds later? And again, I had a smarter partner than I did. He was an electrical engineer, and we just started rolling with that. And LEDs were getting more efficient. This was 2006. So we started going to outdoor lighting, right? You let your dog out at night and they disappear in the darkness. There's skunks, there's coyotes, whatever. If we could put a spotlight on a tree that just went on when the dog went by and then went off, and sold for $20, how great would that be? And that was Mr. Beams. And we built that up to $30 million in sales over the course of 12 years. The biggest moment being when Amazon decided to sell our product in 2011. And it just, we were the ultimate product for Amazon at that time. We were a solution to a problem people had. We were low cost, and our reviews were amazing. So they wanted to prove that they were stronger than the brands, right? That you didn't have to be a GE or Sylvania, that Amazon could bring a small company up. And it worked, and they really helped us and supported us. And along the lines, we started filing a lot of patents. Is anyone involved in patents at all in IP?
Some IP, not patents.
Okay.
Trademark.
All right. I'll skip over it, but we spent $1 million in patents before we actually had anything, and it was a big source of contention with my partner Mike and I. But ultimately, we found a new firm that was able to get patents. You have different IP firms. You have some that are good at strategy, and then you have some that are like the street fighters, and you have to know the difference. The street fighters will go in and sit down with the patent examiner and say, you got this wrong, this is why this is unique. And so we finally found that firm through my dad. One of his golf friends was an IP attorney. That was the only time my dad made a suggestion that really, that wasn't a waste of time, but that was a big one. And and so we filed all these patents, we started getting patents, and we built the business we got. Because we were good on Amazon, Home Depot asked us to sell to them, Lowe's, Target. So we started building, this business. And my brother-in-law lives in Malibu. He's like a big Uber fitness, guy. And he was doing CrossFit with a guy, and that guy was one of the founders of Ring Video Doorbell. And my brother-in-law said, you guys should meet. He introduced me to the CEO, a guy named Jamie Siminoff. You may know from Shark Tank. He was the guy who Shark Tank said no to. And so we started talking, and they bought us in 2017, November. Now, looking back, this was before the tariffs on Chinese imports, which would have killed us. And we were trying to get into the connected home, smart home stuff. And had we not been bought, I am pretty certain we would have failed after that because of these things. So timing, just luck, right? Luck that my brother-in-law met this guy, brought it up, was great. But the entrepreneurial nightmare for me was that Ring got bought by Amazon 3 months later. And suddenly I'm working for, another big company. And as much as Amazon wants to portray themselves as a lean startup, and they do overall act like that, it's changed. They're a bunch of robots now. I mean, they hire people who can do one thing really well and stay focused. So the entrepreneurial mindset was gone. And I had a 3-year commitment to those guys. So I just had to figure out, where do I exist and how do I make it? And I decided the only way to do this is to focus on the people who I had working for me, making sure they stay and have good careers and get in there. So that was very rewarding to me. We only lost 2 people out of 30 over the 3 years, which means, you know, Amazon was overpaying by quite a bit. I think that's what that means. There was some rewarding, but I was so antsy, and I started thinking, all right, I can make another product, or I could do something that will have an impact. And that's where I am now. You know, so my home park, what we've decided to do, where we've come out is, we want people to plant native plants. Now, how do you get people to get excited about native plants? We looked at the funnel of interest. Down here is the people who want to save the bees. You know, it's narrower. They're passionate but narrower. Here's the people who want to increase their property value. Here are the people who want to beautify their yard. You know, it's ego, right? Front yard is ego, backyard is utility, I've found through surveys. So we want to get people to put native plants in their front yard. Now, one of the problems with native plants is they're messy. Who has experience with native plants here? Okay, so native plants are things like Joe Pyeweed and milkweed and black-eyed Susans. What else?
Thistle.
Thistle, yeah. So what we found is that people would plant these native plants, and they'd plant like 2 of something in the middle of, maybe on their tree lawn or in the middle of something, and it would grow and grow and grow and flop over. And I remember taking my wife through Cleveland Heights, which is like the epicenter of, you know, enlightened gardening. And I'm like, look how beautiful this is. There's one street called Bradford where everyone's done native plants in their front yard. And I was excited to show her, look how beautiful it is. And she said to me, this is ugly. This is really ugly, and you shouldn't do this. But my wife has said that to me the whole time I've known her. You shouldn't do this. This is kind of her thing. She's a conservative one. But so Wyatt and I, Wyatt's my partner, the bee guy, just had to figure out, how do we make it so people could put native plants in their front yard? What's the secret to this? There are some really great designers out there who, like the guy who designed the High Line in New York and Millennium Park in Chicago is a guy named Pete Odoof. So you can see videos for him, and he's made these gorgeous designs. And he takes like Van Gogh and impressionist paintings and turns them into plant designs. And we like that, but those plants, you need, to get the impact, you need like an acre to work with. And we were looking at these Cleveland Heights lots, which are maybe, in the front, 1/10 of an acre at most. So we started thinking about, we started studying some of the German designers who have this theory that a good plant structure is ground cover, a mid-layer of perennials, and then some structural plants, like grasses are good structural, something that'll keep it all organized. So Wyatt and I just dug into this whole idea. And I think the aha moment was when we looked at how you buy a sofa online, right? When you need a sofa, you have a space, I need 10 feet, you search through materials and colors, and you pick one. So what if you could shop for a garden like that? And then we could just drop it into your yard. What if shopping for plants was like you lay out your living room? And I think that's when we started thinking, okay, people can grasp that, people can understand that. So, Wyatt and I both were in this saying, we're gonna go big or we're gonna go home. Just having like this work in the east side of Cleveland is not gonna have a big enough impact. So we started thinking about, how do we make this something that would work for everywhere? So we started thinking, how many eco-regions are there in the US? And how many different designs do we need? And where do we get these ideas from? And then where do we source these plants? So we looked around, and my whole theory along the way has not been to invent something completely new, but to combine interesting things in a new way. So there's a lot of good native plant growers in the upper Midwest, Wisconsin and Minnesota and Northern Illinois. And we just started studying what they do, and you know, they're shipping plugs that are about this big. They can fit in a box. A tray of 32 is like this wide, and 32 plants can cover 60 square feet. So we started figuring out how can we use their supply, because we don't want to grow. That's not what we know how to do. How do we use their supply and connect it to customers? So if you go on our website now, which you know, we threw out there, we're in the middle of a redesign already, even though we just launched. You can scroll through these plant combos like you scroll through, you know, furniture, and you can see the look and height. We have this spooky shadow guy next to it, so you can see, you know, is it this high or this high, and you know, you can fall in love with a sofa and then have it shipped to your door, and that's what we're counting on. You know, is the way to go. A 10 by 3 is $99, so we've standardized the pricing. A 60 square foot is $179, and then 100 square feet for $249. And I've spent this whole spring helping people plant these. First, I took I unloaded 1,600 plants from one of the growers. They delivered it to our house, and I had them sitting in my yard and wondering what I'm going to do with these things. And then we started selling them. And you know, I don't know if we're successful yet, because everyone we've sold to except one person is someone we knew and, you know, came to the site. So, you know, when I was talking to Tim about digital marketing, like, you know, we don't have any of that right now. We started buying Google ads, and we realized our website for speed was not optimized for mobile. And 2/3 of our customers are coming in on mobile, so it's a bad experience. So that's why we're redoing the website. That and because it's ugly, but so you know, we're just trying to figure out how do we scale this thing, right? How do we, and that's, you know, the real interesting thing. Anyone who plants it seems to love it. I'm taking a lot of video, getting people saying this is fun, this is amazing. I never knew how to do this. I'd be confused when I went into the nurseries. And that experience is, you know, I compare going to a nursery, like if you compare it to a sofa, it's like not going to the store to buy a sofa. It's like going to a factory and having to pick out the wood, the spring, the cushion, right? You just don't. We've pre-designed these things, and when you get them, there's a map, exactly where to lay these things out. So the front will be the lower level layer. It'll cover the ground, keep the soil moist and weed free. And then you have your perennial layer, and then you have your, you know, your grasses and your taller plants, depending on where it is. So that is, you know, I feel like the entrepreneurial journey is very, can be very self-centered in a lot of ways. I mean, you need so many people to help you, but it's a lot about your own ego in a lot of ways, right? I mean, and once you launch it, it's about fear of failing, which is also a self-centered emotion. That fear of failing drove me really hard. But when I sold the company, I didn't have that anymore. And I didn't have the motivation, you know, and where I refound the motivation was in this idea of doing something for the planet, for my kids, you know. I really am scared we're going to run out of food. And so, yeah, that motivation doesn't keep me up at night like the fear of failure did, but it's pretty good motivation. And I think we all need to find that motivation to get us to make those extra efforts that are oftentimes the difference between success and not success. How many, I'm looking around, I get some nods, but this feeling of this motivation by failure, how many people feel that or have felt that in the past? Okay, yeah. So this is the right audience here. I mean, we're all motivated by failure. I think the really good entrepreneurs are extra motivated by failure. My kids who are better, my son's a better entrepreneur than I am. He's 18, and he took an entrepreneurial thing at school, and he said, "Dad, failure is just a lesson, is what it is. It's not anything but a learning experience." And I mean, that's very nice to say. That was very nice that you said that. Thanks.
So the kid who doesn't pay the bills.
Yeah, but right, when my first company, I couldn't sleep a lot of nights, and I had a really great relationship with a dog. We had a yellow lab named Darby, and she and I had this chemical bond, I guess. But I would get up at night at 3 a.m, and the only thing I could do was just walk circles around our living room, and she would walk with me. And a couple of times she actually threw up, and this was not a dog that threw up much, but she could feel the angst in me, and that feeling was awful, but it really did motivate me. And I wish there was a way, and maybe someone has some examples of harnessing that fear of failure into something more productive than anxiety and not being able to sleep. I don't know, does anyone have an example?
Maybe I'm just a hippie, but anytime I feel scared or intimidated or anything like that, I look at the world in 2 spectrums. You're either on the spectrum of fear or love. If you're feeling that anxiety, you're obviously coming from mostly a space of fear. If you can open yourself up, mind, body, spirit, in any way to open yourself up to ease and the flow of life that really is here present for us. That's it. But hard to do for an entrepreneur because we're thinking, we're not feeling.
Yeah. Anyone else have that's nice mindset. I could never have gotten into that mindset. But, with 2 small kids and
yeah, that's
any other advice on that people have?
You said that motivated by fear. I've always heard that if it was so easy, everyone would go into business. And so the fact that we have and continue to morph and grow, it gives me the motivation that we are doing it. It's not, the decision's already been made. You don't have to decide to do it. You're already doing it. Again, if it was so simple, everybody would be doing it, and they're not.
Yeah.
And so because you can, you continue to do it and let it grow and see what it becomes and nurture it along the way. I like what you said earlier about the 80%. When I was really young, I had a business, and it was Easter or Mother's Day or some floral holiday. And I was working, and a lady who was working for me was also an instructor at a vocational school. And she kept saying, she goes, Jim, she goes, quit stressing. She goes, do you realize that 90% of the population has no idea what you're doing or how you do it? Whatever you do is okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let it go. Quit trying to be perfect 100%. They have no idea that you fell short that much. Let it go. Just make another one. Go. And so that motivated me years ago, but I still kind of think about that. So that 80%, yeah. It is okay to do what you're doing, and you'll figure it out.
Anyone else have stories along those lines?
I think for me, I have a reminder every day on my phone, and it's a list of everything that I have on the line. Kid in college, wife, kid in high school, kid in junior high, so it's if, I need to succeed so that I can.
That motivates you?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That would panic me. It
It does to a certain degree on some days.
Yeah. Yes.
I did something recently that I didn't want to do because I thought it was entrepreneurship failure. I took a part-time job a couple days a week just so I knew I'd have a paycheck. So I wasn't so dependent on live or die if my business fails or whatever. So I just have a fun job that gets me away. I get a little bit of money, and then I'm like, I can pay my bills.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be a long-term strategy, but at least it kept me from getting up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, good. Because a sleepless entrepreneur is no good to anybody.
No.
I mean, sleep deprived is bad. You're an emotional wreck typically.
But I don't like punching that time clock.
I imagine. Well, I actually went to therapy for this. That was one of my things, because I was such a basket case. This was the first venture that failed. So my therapist pointed out to me that I look at life like I'm on the edge of a cliff, and if I take one step, I'm gonna fall, like Wile E. Coyote, and boom. But he said there's actually steps there, right? When you look over, you'll see steps. So you may go down a step or down 2 steps, but you can come back up on those steps. And that framework helped me a lot, because I was being overly dramatic, like, okay, you know, like I'm so important, if I make this wrong decision, I'm gonna fall off this cliff, but it's not. It's usually steps, and if you look at life in the business side of it like that, I think that's helpful. You may go down a step, you may go down 3 steps, but those steps are still there typically to go back up. That was one thing that helped me a lot. Other things that have helped me were meditation was huge, like taking 20 minutes to meditate. I went to, there was someone in Shaker Heights who been teaching since like the 60s, so I knew she was gonna be real good. And it only took like 4 classes, and that made a huge difference. I was just, listening on the way over to Reid Hoffman. He has a podcast with startups. He's a guy who started LinkedIn, and he was interviewing this guy who, tried to work harder and harder and harder, and his conclusion was that hard work is not the model anymore. Maybe it used to be. He was trying to climb the corporate ladder, but like working more in an enlightened, more intelligent way helped. So fast forward to Mr. Beans, I'm trying not to make the same mistakes I made with the power tool company, IGO, and someone introduced me to the Eos System. Is anyone familiar with that? More and more people are. So, are you guys using it?
Yeah.
You are, yeah? What do you think of it?
From my level, so I know more about it. My mother has worked at this company for 25 years in July. So she's been through all of the growing pains with them. We went from 11 people when she started there in 97, and we now are pushing 70. So we needed something in place. Without going into too much, the owners of the company are great. They're the sons of the guy that founded it, but they like to be heavily involved, and this has helped them kind of step back and give their managers a little bit more of the reins to be able to do what they need to do. It's definitely still a work in progress, but we do the quarterly meetings, we have the rocks, we have, everything laid out the way that it's supposed to be, and we're a couple years into it now. I think it's working from where my viewpoint is. Like I said, I'm not heavily involved in the managerial side of things, but I think it really has helped our process and communication and making sure that things are on task, prioritizing and stuff like that.
Okay. Good. So this EOS system, so we're out raising money, and one of the private equity firms said, we only invest in companies that follow this EOS system. So I'm thinking, what is this system? It was a guy in Detroit, Gino Wickman, who wrote a book called Traction. And all he did was borrow like the best of other people's ideas, which I think is actually fine. Like Good to Great, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he merged it into an operating system. It's EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's very simple. It's stuff we've all done before. It just gives you it gives you the drumbeat that you follow. So you have, you do your 10-year vision, then your 3-year plan, and then turn it into a 1-year objective. And then the 1-year objective is turned into rocks for that quarter, big goals for that quarter. And then you have a weekly meeting where everyone it's very structured. You check on the scorecard, which tells you the data, the health of the company, and you review your goals, and then you surface any issue. And it teaches your group how to process issues really well. So my team, every time we hit a glass ceiling at Mr. Beans, the way we broke through was by following the system more closely. And I can't recommend it enough because it's so simple. No one has to learn anything. You don't need any software. Some people, they sell you software, but...
I was gonna say, we don't have the software, but it was almost, when I read the book, I'm like, this is all common sense.
Very common sense. Yeah, you'll be like, duh. The whole time you're reading the book, you're saying duh. But I recommend if you guys, so the book is Traction. We hired someone to help us implement it because I just thought it'd be more powerful to have it coming from someone on the outside. But you could do it yourself. You can implement it yourself. So that's the story of my career. I think, the difference now is this, what I'm doing, it's probably more risky than anything I've ever done, but I don't have that fear factor as much just because my kids are older, we're financially in a better place, but I still have that pride of, of getting it done. So, we have my investors are from Silicon Valley, so it's a friend of mine from business school, and he's the one who helped me sell the company to Ring. He acted as my advisor, and his whole business is taking software firms from startup to scale. And so now we're part of that, all those catchphrases, product market fit. Are you guys familiar with that? What are the other terms that they're using? It's CAC, customer acquisition costs, that kind of stuff. So I feel like I'm seeing how all these startups, I'm learning how these startups do it. I'm learning how software companies do it. We have to hire developers from all over the world and designers for the app and the stuff I had never done before. But I keep going back to the fact that what really drives, what makes you successful is to know your customer and offer them something that has a higher perceived value than what it costs you to provide. I mean, that's really the simple thing that translates no matter how high tech things get. And I feel like the bootstrap method of around here, how we do it, Northeast Ohio, Midwest, is a much better way than this kind of, take a gamble of, pump yourself full of rocket fuel and hope you're pointed in the right direction. Because we only read about the successes. I think 95% of those guys burn out. And so I really like this idea of bootstrapping, being more methodical, being more people focused. And I'm seeing the benefits more and more.